I'm very happy to have an opportunity, to share some commonly used methods of quantitative data analysis. I'm a statistician, and it gives me pleasure to make sense out of numbers. You see, whenever we collect data, we have numbers. And when we have numbers, we utilize quantitative techniques, numeracy skills, analytical skills, and a little bit of computation to make sense out of the numbers we have. And some people who do not have those skills fail to utilize the data sets they have, although they may have spent a lot of resources and time trying to collect data. Okay, so the main purpose of my presentation will be to utilize commonly used methods. These are simple methods. These are methods that are commonly used in all institutions, whether it is South Africa, Zambia, Kenya, Algeria, or Europe, or the United States, Japan, England, anywhere. These are commonly used methods, and if you really need to do research, you need to appreciate those methods, practice those methods, internalize the skills, master them, and develop the confidence you need to perform quantitative data analysis. Okay, I think in a nutshell that summarizes what I intend to do. Now, for starters, I think I would like to refer to a research proposal. Now, let's start briefly by talking about a research proposal. Now, I believe most of you are postgraduate level researchers. Is that right? Okay. If you want to do postgraduate level research, step number one would be for you to write a research proposal. Okay. Nothing happens before you write a research proposal. And what is a research proposal? A research proposal is a scientific document that says, this is my intention, and I have made an assessment that my research is absolutely necessary. There's a gap to be filled in the literature because previous researchers have only done half of the job. There is some part of that research that still needs to be done, and I'm prepared to do that research. I intend to fill a gap in the literature by sacrificing my resources, my money, my time, my knowledge, and dedication. And by so doing, I intend to make a meaningful contribution to the literature. Okay, that is what a research proposal says. Okay, that's it. So when you write a research proposal, you will also be required to comply with institutional guidelines and requirements. Now, in TUT, okay, if you want to submit a research proposal, okay, with the hope of acquiring an academic qualification, then you need to start with the department, and the department will show you what the requirements are, and you need to comply with those requirements and regulations. If you do not comply with their internal requirements and regulations, what happens? Your proposal will take longer to get approved, and valuable time and resources will be wasted. Out of frustration, you may say, well, I've had enough with this department, it's time for me to move on. So you give up. Okay? And such things happen all the time. Now, that's why I've had a chat with Naledi, I think more than 2 years ago. It was a very interesting discussion. When she started doing her study with me, she said, well, I've looked at small enterprises conducting business in South Africa. I've done an extensive review of the literature, and I have identified the main reasons why small business enterprises fail, and I want to make a contribution. So when we went through the literature review she had conducted, okay, it was a comprehensive review of the literature, including meta-analysis. Okay, so she said, well, this is what I've picked up, and there are many researchers who have published articles in those areas, but now these researchers have failed to shed light on how difficult it is to get a loan. And some of the researchers have never said anything about how successful, okay, development assistance programs are. Namely, assistance programs that are designed by CEDA. I think you guys have an understanding of DTI and CEDA, okay? Department of Trade and Industry. CEDA, Small Enterprise Development Agency, okay? Now, if you are an entrepreneur and you wish to run a business, what happens? The government gives you some assistance. Assistance is provided in two forms: administrative assistance plus financial assistance. So what they do is, first they assess your situation, they do a needs assessment exercise, and when they decide that you need the following assistance, then they will decide who should give you that kind of assistance. And sometimes you get assistance in a form of mentoring. Sometimes you are invited to come and attend a training session on how to write a business plan and how to do auditing, accounting, and order some stocks and so on. And the other assistance is about networking. And so yet another form of assistance is to link you up with a potential financial loan provider. Okay, there could be a microfinance agency, and that agency would be happy to extend a loan, okay, provided that you stand a good chance of paying back the loan and benefit from the loan. Okay, do you see what I'm saying? So now those things have been thoroughly investigated, and I think the literature review exercise took more than a year and a half. It has been a worthwhile exercise. It's been quite difficult, but finally, she identified a gap in the literature. You see, in any doctoral study, you got to identify a gap in the literature. Okay, nobody wants a duplicate effort. Okay, so as a PhD student, it does not make sense for you to duplicate what other researchers have done. If you really want to make a meaningful contribution to the literature and make a difference, surely you got to identify a gap. How do you identify a gap? By reading. When you read and critically scrutinize contributions and publications made by other researchers, what happens? You will see where the gap is. As soon as you identify the gap, you think of appropriate mechanisms, methods, and materials with which you could fill that gap. You must not worry about the resource implications. You only take one thing at a time. Because if you try to take the whole lot at a time, you may be frustrated and you may just say, well, I've had enough, let me move on. So take one problem at a time. And then you articulate what you have picked up in a form of a proposal. When you write the proposal, that is your way of saying to potential donors, mentors, and so on, and institutions, to say, this is what we need to do. It's a worthwhile exercise. The expected outputs are as follows, okay? It's an honorable thing to do. However, I have the following resource-related requirements. I also need mentoring. I need guidance, okay? And then the institution responsible will give you some assistance. Number one, you will be given a supervisor or a mentor because you need an intellectual guidance. Secondly, if there are resource implications like research grants, the institution will link you up with the relevant department so that you fill in the necessary forms and apply for a research grant. Okay, the grant will not be given to you automatically. There is an assessment. If there are 5 people who are competing for a grant, what happens? The best person will get the grant. The other 4 students will not get the grant, okay? There are always competitions around resources, okay? So in order to be the best competitor, you need to submit, okay, flawless, defect-free documentation. And when the review is done, surely members of the panel doing the review will know who deserves the grant. In some cases, you will be invited to make an oral presentation. And when you get such a chance, you come forward and you got to speak from the heart. Someone who knows the research problem will not read from something printed, okay? They will know what needs to be said and they will say so. Any questions, they provide adequate answers. And by looking at them, you will definitely form an opinion and you will know who deserves the grant. So now that is why the issue of the research proposal is unavoidable. Okay, we need to talk about the research proposal, what constitutes a good research proposal, and how do we do that. Now let me briefly talk about a research proposal. Now have a look. In your proposal, regardless of where or which institution you submit your proposal to, okay, these are the essential elements of a research proposal. First of all, you need to talk about the introduction and background. Okay? Now, when you go down the list, you come to a review of the literature. Now, literature review means a summary of what has been researched and published and known by other researchers before you took this problem as a challenge. Are we clear? A review of the literature cannot be shallow. A review of the literature, especially at let's say at postgraduate level, it has got to be disciplined, it has got to be in-depth, it has got to be thorough, and most importantly, you got to have empirical evidence to substantiate the claims made by the various researchers. In the absence of empirical evidence, what they have said, okay, will not count. Everything you claim, you got to substantiate that by using evidence from the literature. It could be a journal article, it could be a textbook, it could be an internet-based report, or a report belonging to a government department. So, when you do a thorough review of the literature, you will know where the gap is, and you articulate your problem around that gap, and you figure out appropriate methods and materials with which you can fill that gap. So, a review of the literature. Now, the other reason why a review of the literature carries weight is the following. At the doctoral level, especially at the doctoral level of study, if you see a student who shows no respect for research done by other researchers, that's a guy who is not worthy of being in the program. Are we clear, please? This is very important. You got to be persuaded by intellectual rigor. You got to be persuaded by what is appealing to your intellect. Okay. So you got to appreciate what other scholars have done and what they have contributed. You may like it, you may not like it. However, you got to appreciate what other researchers have done. You see, most researchers have had to suffer enormously in the course of conducting research. Okay? If you go back, let's say by 3,000 years, remember, researchers like Galileo, okay, the Greek researcher, you know about Galileo, okay, and Socrates and so on, Plato and so on. Now, Galileo has had to pay a dear price for challenging the clergy. Okay, what did he say? He said, the earth cannot possibly be flat. See? And when he said that, okay, some members of the church felt that he was challenging the word of God. And needless to say, the word of God does not say the earth is flat. Okay? In fact, the earth is round. It rotates around its own axis. It also rotates around the sun. Now, members of the church at that time had no idea about, okay, what were factual observations about the earth. So when Galileo pointed out those to the clergy, some of them got offended. Now today, for doing research, nobody has to be put on the cross, okay? Society encourages you to do research. You do not have to die for the sheer pleasure of conducting research. It's just that we refuse to read. Okay, reading is a very important attribute. If you do not have the culture of reading, if you do not have the passion for reading, you should probably be doing no research at all. Yeah, definitely. You got to have the passion to read. Okay, when you read, you see, reading is not like watching TV. Okay, when you read, you will have an opportunity, okay, to see logical arguments, scholarly merits, being interrogated and so on. You agree, disagree, you may have a third opinion, that's up to you. However, when you read, you will get to know, okay, the essence of the real issue. So, at the postgraduate level, a student has got to have a very good ability and passion to do a review of the literature. Now, when you do a review of the literature, please bear in mind that in TUT, for example, we value literature published in the last 10 years. Okay, today is 2019. So if you submit your proposal, okay, most of your references have got to be based on journal articles, okay, accredited, peer-reviewed, refereed journals published in the last 10 years. I'm not saying journal articles published in, shortly after the Second World War are useless. All I'm saying is, okay, people are publishing, and there are important published articles that have come to the fore in the last 10 years. So it would be in your favor to benefit from what has been researched, okay, recently. So that's it, the last 10 years, roughly. So that's the guideline. Now let's talk about the objectives of study. Now when you write the objective of your study, we follow, okay, there are, the first one is the broad objective, the overall objective. So after stating the overall objective, you also state the specific aims and objectives of the study. And after that, you talk about research questions, okay? The research questions are important, and you got to demonstrate your capacity to provide adequate scientific answers after having conducted your research. All right? Then we have the methods and materials of study. Okay, the methods and materials of study relate to the sample size of your study, the sampling technique you will be using, okay, the study design, the population size, and the criteria of inclusion, the criteria of exclusion, and statistical methods of data analysis. Now, I'm not referring to qualitative research methods. You have two broad areas. In the first area, you consider quantitative or statistical methods, okay, where your variables are measurable, and in cases where your variables are objective, okay, you can use quantitative methods of data collection and analysis. Example, income in rand, okay, the age of a person in years, the weight of an individual in kilograms, distance in kilometers, okay, body temperature in degrees centigrade, the volume of water in cubic meters. Okay, these are examples of continuous or measurable variables of study. When you have measurable variables of study, you use quantitative or statistical methods of data collection and analysis. Is that clear? Now, in the other category, you have subjective variables. Subjective, because they cannot be quantified, right? And an example of a subjective variable is degree of satisfaction with the quality of municipal services delivered by City of Tshwane. Okay, how happy are you with the quality of services delivered by City of Tshwane? You see, this is a subjective question. So on a scale varying from 1 to 5, somebody could say they are very happy, and under near identical circumstances, another respondent would say, I'm not happy at all. Do you see the difference here? So when you deal with subjective variables of study, you cannot account for the precision in measurement. Now, by contrast, when you deal with statistical or continuous or measurable variables of study, you will do two things. Number one, you will be able to estimate your variable of study, number one. Secondly, you will also be able to account for the precision in your estimation procedure. Okay, so my personal preference is to do quantitative research wherever I have the opportunity to do so. If my variables of study are quantitative in nature, if they can be measured, then I use quantitative methods of data analysis, quantitative methods of data collection. All right. Now, if that's not the case, then you resort to qualitative or subjective methods of data collection and analysis. So, in principle, quantitative methods and qualitative methods of research play a complementary role. Okay? There is no such thing saying this is useful while the other one is useless. Okay? The two methods are complementary in nature. The failure of one will be compensated for by the strength of the other. Okay? In areas where qualitative methods apply, you should follow qualitative methods by conducting in-depth interviews, for example. Okay? Now, what happens if you insist on using quantitative methods, okay, knowing that your variables are subjective? You will not have any tangible result. You will make measurement-related errors, and far from producing reliable estimates, you will end up introducing measurement-related bias. So you got to know which method is preferable and under what circumstances. And as soon as you figure that out, what do? You use that appropriate method. And I see the two methods play complementary roles. So please bear that in mind. Some time ago, there was a colleague of mine who said he has no regard for qualitative research methods because in his years of experience, he has said there were so many challenges in conducting in-depth interviews and so on and so forth. He went on to say, I actively encourage my students to look the other way. Okay? But you see, in the audience, there was a professor of qualitative research, a highly accomplished professor. She was sitting in the audience. It's just that she never said anything until the lecture was over. And when the lecture was over, okay, she gave us an introductory remark and she referred us to a book she had written on qualitative research methods. So the message was that, okay, you got to know which of the two methods to use depending on the kinds of variables of study you have in your proposal. So the two methods play a complementary role. So that has been a valuable lesson for all of us. Okay, so now the next thing will be to talk about list of variables of study and the levels. Now, when you do your proposal, there is a section where you got to articulate your list of variables. Now you remember to draw up a questionnaire. You got to know what kind of variables you are interested in. Okay? For example, if somebody wants to do a study about factors that affect, okay, academic performance among TUT students, they should be looking at a number of factors. Okay, number of hours of study per day, access to the library, access to books that are helpful. Okay, does the student have access to mentoring? Okay, do they have practical sessions? Do they attend tutorial sessions? How happy are they with the quality of teaching provided in class? Okay, and how effectively do they utilize their time on campus? The other thing, are they healthy? Do they eat properly? Do they exercise properly? Okay, psychologically, are they ready, okay, to part with their folks and stay here and give their studies undivided attention? Or do they worry a lot about their folks? Do they come from far away? all such reasons, okay, these factors are important. They are related to the study. So when you collect data, you got to collect data on all of these variables. And the other thing is, do they owe TUT unpaid money? You know about that, If you want your transcript from TUT, and if you owe TUT unpaid money, what happens? TUT says, first of all, you got to go and pay up. After you settle your arrears, then you should go and ask for a copy of your transcript. Okay? Well, unfortunately, you see, if people do not pay for services that are provided to them, life cannot go on. So we must not, assume that things happen free of charge. There's a cost behind everything. When somebody provides service, there's a cost. And so we should be open enough, honest enough to recognize that such requirements must be adequately met by us. So it's just a fair exercise. You must not feel bad about that. Now let's talk about data collection procedures like interviews and questionnaires. Now, an interview is informative. It allows you to have a face-to-face conversation with the respondent of your study. However, an interview is also associated with bias. Okay, sometimes you will end up saying too much. Okay, and the people will end up getting biased. So they may decide to give you an answer that would make you happy, and that is not necessarily the truthful answer. Does that make sense? So that's the problem of an interview. Okay? Now the questionnaire is good, but the questionnaire requires the ability to understand, okay, the questions with no assistance, and your respondents have got to have enough exposure to your research topic. So if they do not understand enough about the research you wish to conduct, they will end up giving you untruthful or wrong answers, you see? So that's, now remember the interview and the questionnaire, both of them have got pluses and minuses. So you need to know which method to use for data collection. Now, the next item will be validity and reliability. These are important aspects. I always emphasize them because when students submit their proposals, they get comments from academic committees. And when you talk about validity now, they say, what the hell is this? And I say, validity. Remember, validity is a question of making sure that you are measuring what you are required to measure. Nothing more, nothing less. It's like I just asked for a cup of tea and somebody gave me a cup of coffee. Well, that's not what I asked for. See, I said I need a cup of tea, so I need to be given a cup of tea. How sure are you that you are measuring what you intend to measure? So validity comes in to ensure that. And so we ensure validity mostly by conducting a pilot study, okay? A pilot study comes before the actual study. You take a sample of, a simple random sample of, let's say, 5 respondents, and you administer your questionnaire, okay? Now you give it to them, and you see how they complete the questions in the questionnaire. And you will encounter some questions. And after you get their feedback, what happens? You refine your questionnaire of study. It has happened before. Now, if you remember when just before you embarked on data collection, there was a pilot study done. And out of that pilot study, we got valuable constructive comments, okay? Some of the questions had to be rephrased. In fact, we had to scrap off 3 or 4 questions. So we refined our questionnaire of study before conducting the actual study. So that was done to ensure content validity, to make sure that what you measure is precisely what you are required to measure vis-a-vis the proposal of your study. Right. Now, let's talk about reliability, the other aspect. Yes, please.
Prof, I just wanted to understand, when you say you do a pilot
yes.
Study, is it before ethical clearance or after?
No, before. Oh. It's okay. You see, you cannot collect data at TUT before you are granted research ethics approval. Now, research ethics approval, well, it takes, I think, it takes long to get research ethics approval. However, while waiting for your research ethics approval, you can do yourself a favor by conducting a pilot study. You see, to do a pilot study with a sample of size 5 respondents, okay? Now, in her case, what we did was we administered the questionnaire to 5 operators of small business enterprises, 5 of them. And the 5 of them came back. Now, you see, when we saw what they have had to say, they made very good comments. So some of the questions had to be rephrased. They had to be worded. And a few questions had to be dropped. And we added a couple. So that was a very helpful exercise. Now, after we did that, shortly thereafter, we got ethics approval. And when we got ethics approval, the final version of your questionnaire of study was ready for duplication. And then we used that one for collecting data. Yes, sir.
If I use somebody's instrument,
yes.
Somebody did a study in that.
Yes.
And then I find that there's a lot of mistakes in the question, in the way they structure the questions.
Yes.
Should I ask for permission from himself to change the structure of questions, or I can do it on my own? And after that, do I have to do a pilot study now with that questionnaire designed from those questions, even though they were almost the same? What's happening?
Okay. First of all, whenever you use an instrument developed by a researcher, okay, it's only fair to acknowledge the author for their contributions. Okay, you have to be upfront. In your proposal, you got to say, I'm using an amended version of a questionnaire developed by Mr. So-and-so, and I've made a few changes, and the citation for the original questionnaire is given as follows. So by so doing, you are telling people that you are using a questionnaire, okay, after having it adapted to your own study. You see, to adapt it to your study is a very useful exercise because no 2 environments can be identical. Okay, a questionnaire may have been found suitable for a study conducted in England. However, when you come into South Africa, surely there must be some amendments. You got to make it relevant to the local situations here. So it's a procedure of adaptation. It's a regularly done exercise. Everybody does adaptation. And it also shows that you have benefited from a review of the literature. Because if you did not read, you could not have come across that questionnaire of study. So that's a very important item. Now, just remember, every time you use an instrument developed by others, you do your best to make it suitable and relevant to your own study. And in that exercise, you will see that some of the questions may not be applicable in your case. Yeah, so you need to do some adaptation there.
Then do I pilot it now?
Yes, you do piloting. Yeah, you always do a pilot study. Before doing the actual study, there's always benefit in conducting a pilot study. You see, you're not going to die if you administer your questionnaire to 5 people. It's a fairly simple, straightforward exercise. However, by conducting a pilot study, you will have an opportunity to further refine your questionnaire of study. You will pick up mistakes you were never aware of. So, you see, you will come across mistakes and areas that need improvement only by conducting a pilot study. So you need to persuade people to take part in your study. You need to allow them to critically comment on what it is you have done. You should allow them to say anything. And out of that, you will definitely end up with a refined and improved instrument for data collection. And if you have used any materials produced by some of the guys, please, you got to be the first person to acknowledge that. It's unethical to utilize an intellectual property produced by somebody without saying, I have benefited from this and I'm grateful for that. So it's, look, this is something we always have to do. And we encourage our students to also produce a similarity report. In TUT, the cutoff point is 20%. You obtain a similarity report for your research dissertation, and if that percentage similarity exceeds 20%, then you will be required to rewrite sections of your thesis that are similar to what has been written by other researchers elsewhere. So in many institutions, the cutoff point is 20%. So we stick to 20%. You need to be familiar with that. And so just remember, now let's quickly go to the next item. Now, theoretical framework of study. This is also important. A theoretical framework of study is required, especially in doctoral level studies. A theoretical framework of study. Okay, some textbooks refer to this as a conceptual framework of study. You see, a theoretical framework of study is a guideline that tells you, courtesy of the following theory, a theoretical principle, this problem has been alleviated in Germany under near identical circumstances. There is no reason why a similar problem cannot be alleviated here in South Africa. Are we clear? Just remember, theoretical principles always guide practical applications. It's not the other way around. Please, you must never forget this. Practice does not guide theoretical principles. Theoretical principles always guide practical applications. If somebody fails to appreciate a theoretical principle, that somebody is not ready for doing research. Okay? So, and then the classic proof is the case of Albert Einstein in 1905, when Albert Einstein spoke about, okay, the theory of relativity, you know, the photoelectric effect and so on. People could not understand what it is Albert Einstein was talking about. Okay? It was a case where one man said what had to be said, but the rest of humanity failed to cope with what that guy did. They could not understand what it is Einstein was talking about. Okay? It took the rest of mankind so many years to realize that Einstein was right. So some people do not have to go to a laboratory to verify, okay, the accuracy of an argument. Okay, they work it out in their brains. Not so many people can do that. Okay, now the vast majority of people, what do? They say, take me to a laboratory, show me that this is true, then I will believe you. But there are people who do not need to be taken to a laboratory. They understand it. You see, these are individual differences, and Einstein was one such character. So the failure of mankind to appreciate what Einstein said in his theory did not in any way mean he was wrong. It only meant that the rest of mankind were too blind to see what he was talking about. So theoretical principles always guide practical applications. So in any doctoral level study, in your research proposal, there has got to be a section on theoretical framework. You got to be persuaded by a theoretical principle which is relevant to your study, which has been tested, okay, for veracity elsewhere, and it has produced tangible results. It has alleviated a problem in society. So your argument should be to say, this theoretical principle has worked in Germany, so let's give it a chance, okay, to work in South Africa. Are we clear about this? So a PhD level research proposal is all about a theoretical framework. You got to say, I am persuaded by this underlying theory. I want to test the veracity of this theoretical principle by conducting research. If it is true, and if I carry out my experiment as recommended, then I will end up alleviating a major problem in South Africa. And in so doing, I will be able to make a meaningful contribution to the literature. So, no proposals, no PhD level proposals should be submitted without a theoretical framework. The theoretical framework, now I'll give you an example, a simple example. Take, for example, the city of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. They are very good in waste management, recycling and so on. Municipal solid waste management. They are one of the best. So, South Africa has signed a protocol with Malaysia. It's called Operation Pakisa. How many of you are aware of Pakisa? Anybody who is aware of Operation Pakisa? Anybody? Phakisa. Operation Pakisa. It's a protocol signed between South Africa and the government of Malaysia. And that protocol allows city of Tshwane to work with the city of Kuala Lumpur and enhance, okay, sanitary, the processing of municipal solid waste. So, this is a textbook example. You copy what the Malaysians have done in the city of Kuala Lumpur, and you make it work in the city of Tshwane. If the Malaysians have succeeded, there is no reason why residents of city of Tshwane cannot succeed. You create a near identical circumstance, and then you apply that theoretical principle with enough vigor, resources, and commitment. What happens? You will be able to replicate the miracle you saw in the city of Kuala Lumpur. You see, Kuala Lumpur is a very clean city, by the way. It's not, it may not compare with Singapore, but make no mistake about it. They are very good at waste recycling and waste minimization at source level and so on, sorting and so on. And they recycle waste materials. They make a lot of money. So you just have to remember, by borrowing theoretical principles from areas where you have had success, you bring them in and you benefit from that application. So everything is guided by a theoretical framework of study. And at the PhD level, your major contribution to the literature would be to say, I've constructed a theoretical framework based on my study, and I call this my contribution to the literature. Example, the thesis written by Naledi has got a fully fledged section on a theoretical framework constructed by her. Okay? Now that framework says, let's give this a chance. Okay, now you have a potential entrepreneur with the right skills, struggling to get money. Okay? Now the framework says, let's monitor, evaluate, and support this guy. Okay? Let's work with him until this guy makes success. It may take us 2 years, but let's follow up. Let's not give up. So, it's a theoretical principle which says, if you support them, if you walk with them, if you monitor them, evaluate them, stay there with them for a couple of years, what happens? In fact, most of the entrepreneurs will succeed. They will break even, they will get some profit, and they will not throw in their towel and go away. See, at the moment, you see some of them struggling, they run out of ideas, they are very poor at networking and so on. Now, let me give you a practical example. You see, until recently, nobody paid attention to networking. Okay, when you network, what happens? You go to your folks. And if those people give you merchandise in bulk, on credit, and your only requirement is to go and do retail, what are the chances of you failing? I don't think so. So the biggest hurdle is to get the stocks, the merchandise, from a wholesale distributor. Now, how do you get that done? By doing networking. Someone has got to step in as a guarantor. Because most of the guys doing small enterprises, they do not have networking skills. Okay? If they need money, the potential microfinance institution will demand a collateral. And how many of them have collaterals? Very few of them. So that explains the reason why you have a high failure rate among startup enterprises in the city of Swadi. Okay, this is one of the major findings of our studies. So the reason why I'm giving you such graphic examples is so that you see, now by reading the literature, you will have an idea, and you bring in a framework that has been tested and verified elsewhere. You give it a chance. You apply the same principle here, and surely you go to succeed. So in a doctoral level study, the framework of study is unavoidable. Now let's have a look at statistical methods. Now, when you talk about statistical methods, you must not be overwhelmed with statistical jargons. Okay? Now, just remember, statistical methods have got to be similar. They have got to be suitable for performing data analysis in your own study. And invariably, I always come across simple procedures like frequency tables and cross-tab analysis. Okay, those are the ones you need. Okay, you need frequency tables, and you need also graphical methods like pie charts, bar charts. You do cross-tab analysis, okay, cross-tabs. And you also do regression analysis and so on. So you must not be overwhelmed with statistical jargons, okay? Just tell yourself that you will make the effort to master a specific skill that is relevant to your study. Okay, do not tell yourself you are wasting your time, because you're not. There are some students who tell themselves they are wasting their time, and they will never appreciate, they will never show, okay, enough dedication to the study and analysis that has got to be done. So what you should do is you tell yourself that you are not wasting your time, you are doing the right thing, and you are definitely, you will not stop studying until you get what you want. So you have to remember that it's not really a difficult thing, okay? It's a matter of you showing enough commitment. And you follow numerical examples. I've got numerical examples here. So I think the last one would be to talk about expected outputs. Well, you should say what the potential expected outputs of your study are. Then we also have limitations of study. Is there some?
I'll just see if I can fix it.
No, this is okay.
Okay.
This is all right here. So, okay, let me just, so we don't have any, we can go on.
Okay, yes, you can
okay.
go on.
So let's just quickly have a look here. Limitations of study. There is someone who, you see, there's somebody who was saying it may not be helpful for him to talk about limitations of study. But according to me, there is nothing wrong, okay, talking about your own limitations of study. It should be yourself who should be the first person to say, my study has got the following limitations. And I call upon the next researcher, okay, to do a better job in comparison with the quality of work I've done. So do not try to cover up shortcomings and limitations you have had to endure. Okay, just make sure that there is nothing wrong in acknowledging your limitations. There could be resource-related limitations. There could be time constraints. There could be lack of expertise and so on, introduction of bias and so on. Please try to be upfront on such issues. Now, I want to talk about list of references. Now, in TUT, we are guided by the old Harvard referencing style. Okay, how many of you are aware of the old Harvard referencing style? Anybody who has used, okay, old Harvard, well, globally, I think old Harvard is not really a popular choice. However, in TUT, we always use the old Harvard referencing style. So when you submit a proposal, okay, everything, all your citations and references must be consistent with guidelines for the old Harvard referencing and citation style. And we have a guideline to be used. It's not difficult to do. So let's now go to, now let me just make a brief comparison between quantitative and qualitative research. You see, in quantitative research, your variables of study are measurable. So you will be able to measure your parameters. You should also be able to provide the variance of estimation in quantitative methods because your variables are measurable, they are objective, and it's not a difficult thing to do. Now, by contrast, in qualitative research, okay, it's not easy to measure the variance of estimation because your variables are subjective in nature. Okay, that's one important thing. And now, look, in qualitative research, we conduct observations, you conduct in-depth interviews, and you also use your own methods of seeking information. And sometimes you may have to have focus group interviews, okay, rather than individual in-depth interviews. Now, in quantitative methods, mostly the variables are measurable. Therefore, you go to each individual respondent and you administer your questionnaire of study, or you take the measurement, you record your measurements, you capture your data, you analyze your data, interpret your results of analysis, and write up your research report. Okay. So in TUT, we welcome both methods, okay? Please do not listen to anybody telling you you got to do only quantitative research. That's not true. Okay, you are welcome to use purely quantitative methods, purely qualitative research methods, and guess what? A combination of quantitative and qualitative methods of data collection and analysis. Okay? One of our students has successfully used a combination of quantitative and qualitative research methods. You see what she did, eh? She administered her questionnaire of study to all of them, and then she had in-depth interviews with 4 well-placed senior managers. It was a mine. I'm not going to give you the name of the mine, okay? And she had in-depth, 1-hour-long tape-recorded interviews with 4 well-placed senior managers. And she had to persuade them. They were quite reluctant to, you see, to be tape-recorded. However, she managed to convince them, and she managed to tape record the interview. Okay, she had to do tallying, she had to do coding, and she had to create categories, and then she had to do triangulation and so on. And we also have a second example from within TUT. He's an academic staff, okay, and he has used qualitative in-depth interviews plus the administration of questionnaires. He has used a combination of both methods quite successfully. So the shortcoming of one method has been compensated for by the strength of the other method. So by using a combination of quantitative and qualitative methods, the student has managed to give a beautiful picture, and he has explained his research problem elegantly. He has proposed a feasible remedial solution. He has constructed a framework, and he has successfully marketed his framework, and now his framework is being adopted. He has had a favorable response. Yes, sir. Or is it, oh, you wanted to ask? Okay, yeah.
Please fight with my supervisor.
Yeah.
I'm doing the same too.
Yes.
We're fighting on the issue of saying, she says, I should, when I'm busy with my proposal, she says, my strategy is I'm using qualitative and quantitative.
Yes.
But it's not mixed methods.
Yeah.
I fail to understand that every day I always say, it's a mixed method. She say, no, it's qualitative and quantitative.
Yes.
It's mixed method.
There is nothing wrong with that. You see, just remember, I will give you a graphical example. Let me just give you a practical example which has worked for us. You see, in that mine, members of the union, look, the truth be told, they were quite reluctant to take part in the study. Okay? They were so scared, they said, come on, I'm not prepared to take part in your study. I wish you well, but please go as far away from me as possible. I do not want you to mention my name, and please, ideally you should go somewhere else. So, finally, you ensure anonymity and you swear by God that the name will not be given out to a third party, and he should feel comfortable talking about the problems he has had to encounter at the mine and so on. I'm telling you, it's easier said than done. You see, depending on how sensitive your study is, some people feel threatened and they say, I will not take part in your study, and I don't want to put myself and my career at risk because of you. So there's a lot of persuasion that has to happen, okay? And this student, okay, he set up a meeting. When all was concluded, okay, when the entire study was concluded, he called upon all of them to come, and he burned everything while they were watching. Yeah. He burned all data collected from them, okay, with the detail. You do remember, eh? So the spreadsheet was completely free of individual identifiers like names, departments, and so on. So he did that to minimize the risk and to encourage people to take part in his study. However, in-depth interviews. Now let's talk about in-depth interviews. The 4 guys who were tape recorded for 1 hour each. They said, let's destroy the tape. So everything was transcribed, and after that was done, the tapes had to be burned. They couldn't trust him. So qualitative in-depth interviews are not so easy to do. Okay, let's acknowledge that. People feel intimidated. I will give you a second example. There is a student in TUT who has done a doctoral level study on compliance to the PFMA, the Public Finance Management Act. You are aware of the PFMA. In City of Swane now, he goes to all employees of the finance department, and now he says, let's talk about that. Did you comply with this aspect of the PFMA? How many times do you understand what I'm saying here? This has not been easy. I don't want to tell you how hard it was, but I promise you it was the most difficult exercise. And in the end, the student was lucky that he got his data. He had to persuade so many people to take part in his study and so on. And so when you conduct your study, please make sure that you have access to data, because in the absence of data, nothing will happen. your proposal will not be implemented if your participants shy away from taking part in your study. So please bear in mind that you need to persuade your respondents by telling them that it's a worthwhile exercise and they should cooperate with you. Yes? No, I don't have the remote, but it's okay. I'm perfectly all right. Huh? This is working well. Yeah. Okay, so let's do. Okay. Okay, let's just quickly talk about this. By the way, everybody in this class is going to receive copies of the raw data sets and the lecture halls. The lecture notes. So you will be receiving them by email. And so because you are going to receive them, you're not going to miss out anything. So, and the lecture notes are organized in such a way that you follow the steps, you see the results, the printouts, so they are fairly easy to follow, okay? Now let's quickly wrap this up now. So let's quickly talk about methods of collecting qualitative data. Now looking at what is happening, have a look now. This is personal observation. Now, you can also anticipate. You see, you can anticipate what is possible, what is reasonable, what is feasible. Okay? And when you conduct an interview, okay, please create an environment for your respondents that guarantees anonymity and confidentiality. If they feel threatened, or if they get the impression that you're going to share what they have given you with a third party, they will not give you truthful answers. Okay? I've seen this before. Okay? When you conduct qualitative in-depth interviews, if you do not create an environment that guarantees anonymity, people will simply give you untruthful answers just to make you happy. And that's not the truth. So you will be analyzing garbage and your research findings will not make a difference. So be aware of that. Now, when you take focus groups, within a focus group, you just make sure that, you see, those people who constitute a group are similar. They must be homogeneous. They have got to have a similar attitude, similar background characteristics, and so on. If that's not the case, okay, your focus groups will not be successful. Okay, this is a difficult aspect of qualitative research. Okay, just bear that in mind. Now, I want you to have a look here. There are two broad categories of commonly used statistical tests. Now, in category one, we have parametric methods. You see, parametric methods are based on large sample sizes, and non-parametric methods are based on small sample sizes. So when you do research, okay, by using quantitative methods, just make sure that you have enough resources to collect data from about, and I'm saying about, 120 respondents, if possible. Okay, it's a crude figure we recommend to our students. No fewer than 120. So 120 will allow you to use, okay, chi-square tests. You see, the chi-square random variable benefits from a large sample size. You see, the degrees of freedom of the chi-square random variable appreciate depending on how large the sample size is. You see, when the sample size falls down, the degrees of freedom of the chi-square statistic go down, and that compromises the degree of reliability of your findings. So if you want to have theoretically reliable findings, okay, you need to use a chi-square based test. To use a chi-square based test, your sample size has got to be large enough. And a cutoff figure, I recommend 120, because if 20 of them disappear or refuse to take part in your study, you will fall back on the 100. And so with a sample of size 100, you will be able to come up with something reasonable. So you can use that as a rough guideline. Okay? So now let's talk about this. Now let's take commonly used parametric tests. Now, the one sample t-test is a simple parametric test, and it's useful for comparing a hypothesized value with a figure you have picked up from the literature. So the one sample t-test is one example. The next one is, and now let me give you an example. To find out if the pollution level in a public source of drinking water exceeds the level recommended by the city council. Some time ago, there was a student who had to assess pollution levels in Durban at a small town. It's a township, Isipingo. So she had to draw water samples, and she had to compare that figure with the recommended figure at Martin West. You see, in the city, there is a health department, and the health department has got levels that should be complied with. So she drew samples, and she used the one sample t-test, okay, to compare, okay, how similar the pollution level was with the maximum recommended level by the city. So the next example will be the two-sample and Parity test. It's also very important. If you want to compare two groups that are independent of each other, you need to use the two-sample and Parity test. Okay, the two-sample and Parity test. Another name is the two-sample independent. See, the two independent samples t-test. Okay, the independent samples t-test. Now, example, to compare two teaching methods. Okay, two teaching methods. One of our MBA students has used the two-sample and Parity test, okay, in KwaZulu-Natal. In one group, they had a feeding program, a school feeding program. In the other group, there was no feeding program. And the student compared attendance rates and competencies in mathematics and science. Okay? The study was funded by AVBOB. It's an insurance company, a South African. Anybody who knows about AVBOB? AVBOB. Yeah, so the guy was one of my MBA students. He's an employee of AVBOB. So he went there and he conducted his study. And the finding, you must not be surprised. He had better attendance, better discipline, and a relatively better pass rate at the school where they had a school feeding program. Now, does anybody have to do research to confirm this? You know, how ironic is that? Do you have to do research to confirm that if you have a school feeding program, attendance would be better and pass rates would be better? Anyway, the guy did an MBA level study. Okay, yeah, I remember the name, Dino Play. Yes, Dino Play. He's the one who conducted that study. After he conducted the study, he graduated. He also got an award. Yeah, he got an award. So the two-sample and Parity test. It's a very important test. Okay, in group one, you have a group that is subject to standard methods. In group two, you have another group which is given something different. The null hypothesis says the two groups are the same with regards to your variable of study. The alternative hypothesis says the two groups are significantly different with regards to your variables of study, namely class attendance and pass rates. Of course, in the case of Dino, he ended up rejecting the null hypothesis in both cases. School attendance was better, plus pass rates were better. So, does that make sense? You can do a similar kind of study here. Yeah. So, now let's take another example. Tests on proportions. Okay. Now, tests on proportions are also commonly used. You have a proportion here coming out of a population of interest, and you compare that population with another population. And you see what is missing in the second population. And you want to know whether the two populations differ with regards to your variable of study. Okay? So tests on proportions, it's also useful. Now let's take another example here. The Pearson chi-square test of association. The Pearson chi-square test of association. This is a very useful cross-tab association, and everybody uses this test. In order to do a cross-tab analysis by using the Pearson chi-square test, you got to have a fairly large sample size. And that's why I keep talking about 120 or more. Okay? The null hypothesis says the two groups are independent of each other. The alternative hypothesis says the two groups are not independent of each other. Okay? Example. Now, somebody could claim that there is a significant association between gender and the outcome of applications for promotions. It has happened at Krisani Baragwana Hospital. The nurses said, well, promotions are given only to male employees and we are overlooked. So, data was collected and the Pearson chi-square test of association was used to test the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis says there is no significant association between gender and the outcome of applications for promotions. The alternative hypothesis says there is a significant association. And unfortunately, in the case of that hospital, the p-value was large and there was no significant association. So those guys who made a claim saying that they have been treated unfairly did not have empirical evidence to substantiate their claim. So they lost. So, but does that make sense? You see, you can always use a chi-square test of association, okay? It's commonly referred to as the Pearson chi-square test of association. Pearson is the name of Karl Pearson. He's a German mathematician. The test has been around since the Second World War, and it is still highly in demand. And in fact, if you go to the library and see the methods used for data analysis, a chi-square test of association is used by almost everyone. Okay, so it's a very important test of association. You can also use it. All right. Now let's scroll down. The next one will be, okay, linear correlation, linear regression and correlation, okay? Now, regression and correlation are important. You see, linear regression and correlation are important procedures in data analysis. Now, I will give you an example. I've got an MBA student, and I think she's still working at SARS. Okay, she's an employee of SARS. You know, everybody knows SARS. Now, this lady collected data from SARS, and her variables are, okay, the amount of tax collected by industry, she disaggregated by economic sector, by province, and and now she did regression analysis. She fitted a regression model. And there was, now one of her models showed a linear relationship between, okay, an internal mechanism to improve tax collection and what happened in the field. Okay, does that make sense? See, SARS is responsible for collecting tax money. You see, the budget speech cannot be delivered unless SARS collects tax money efficiently. Are we clear? There are so many people who fail to pay tax to SARS. They enjoy making money. They make money. Unfortunately, you see them fumbling around. You see them struggling to pay tax money. So SARS has a program which says, let's work together. We will help you to pay off your tax. We will assist you. You do not need any consultant. And you see, it's a very important initiative from SARS. You see, by playing ball with the general population, they encourage the general population to come forward and pay tax. They pay tax immediately with no controversies, no time wasted and so on. So it's a win-win for both. The people win because their problems are sorted out. Secondly, SARS also collects its tax money, it reports and so on. So she did a regression analysis to assess the feasibility of the incentive program. And she found that that incentive, the initiative of giving an incentive, was quite helpful. So she fitted a regression model, okay, and it's still being used by SARS. That was a very good contribution. This is our MBA student, one of our MBA students. So every now and then you come across some students who make a valuable contribution to business, industry, and government. Okay, these are one of our. These are our own students, and you got to be proud of them. So there are also some of our students who have successfully published the research findings in international journals. Okay, I can give you a few examples, but there are some TUT students who have published very important research findings in local and international journals. So the plan is to get as many publications as possible from our students. Every time you publish, you get credit. And TUT gets subsidy. And when you publish, definitely the prestige of TUT will improve. People will get to know about TUT, and the respect they have for TUT will increase. So the publication, I beg to differ, and according to me, the publication is more important in comparison with the dissertation. That's the way, unfortunately, that's the way I look at it. Okay, I value the publication, okay, as being more important than the dissertation. See, the publication is very important. So regression analysis is important. Now have a look at the correlation coefficient here. Now the correlation coefficient R is an important indicator of the strength of association between two variables. Okay, if the correlation coefficient is 0, it means the two variables are independent of each other. If the correlation coefficient is 1, it means the two variables are perfectly and positively associated with each other. Okay? If the correlation coefficient is -1, it means they are perfectly and negatively correlated with each other. So these properties must be remembered. I believe some of you may have come across these. So let me go through this and okay, let me just briefly talk about this. The one-way analysis of variance. Okay, if we have 3 or more groups to be compared with each other, you need to use the one-way analysis of variance test. The one-way analysis of variance test allows you to compare 3 or more independent groups with each other with regards to one variable of interest, which is why you have the phrase one way. Because one way could easily be two-way. It could also be multi-way. Example, you want to compare 3 painkillers, okay? You have 3 types of painkillers and you want to know which of the painkillers is the best. So you can use the one-way analysis of variance for comparing the three types of painkillers. Okay, what is your variable of interest now? The time taken to bring about relief from pain. Okay, the best drug will give you relief from pain in the shortest possible time. Is that correct? You see? So the only variable of interest is the time taken to bring about relief. What happens if you have two variables of interest? It becomes a two-way analysis of variance problem. If you have three variables of interest, it will be a three-way analysis of variance problem. Example, take three brands of cars. Okay, let's take Toyota, let's take Mazda, let's also take Renault, the French car. So if you are only interested in fuel consumption or fuel economy, okay, you can use the one-way analysis of variance technique for comparing the three brands with each other. In addition to fuel economy, let's say you are also interested in comfort. Okay? It becomes a two-way analysis of variance problem, two-way. If you introduce a third variable of interest, the problem becomes a three-way analysis of variance problem. Now, in many cases, people are interested only in one-way analysis of variance problems. Okay, so you just have to remember, you got to have a particular attention to the one-way analysis of variance problem. So that's why I want to talk about it. Now, the next one will be repeated. Now, look, multiple regression, multiple linear regression analysis. We also have time series analysis. Okay, you see, time series analysis. Now, talking about time series analysis, anything that varies depending on time, something that varies as time goes on is a time series. So when you do time series analysis, your job is to show, okay, variability as a function of time. An example, for example, anybody who can suggest something where we can use time series analysis? Take, for example, the price of oil from the Middle East. Okay? The price of oil fluctuates as a function of time, is that right? Yeah, so as time goes on, the price of oil, well, generally it has been coming up, okay? And depending on many factors, the price of oil fluctuates. So another example, what about platinum? The cost of platinum. Yes, the cost of gold. Any other example? The cost of wheat, milk, bread. Do they vary depending on time? Yes, they do. So if you find variables that vary depending on time, then you can do a time series analysis. Now, let's move on and talk about binary logistic regression analysis. Now, you see, binary logistic regression analysis. Now, in most of the postgraduate level research exercises we have seen until now, the dependent variable of study is dichotomous. It's a yes or no variable of study. A program succeeds or fails. So it's a yes or no variable. A program, let's say you have an initiative from City of Swane, and that initiative succeeds or fails. Okay, this is a dichotomous variable. It's a yes or no variable. Now, whenever you have a dependent variable of study which has only two possible values, you can use the binary logistic regression model. And many students in TUT use binary logistic regression analysis. If you go to UP, University of Pretoria, WITS, and so on, many people use, okay, binary models for doing their postgraduate level research. And mostly the studies are about a program succeeding or failing. Now, in your case, it's about the entrepreneur being granted a loan or not being granted a loan. Do you remember in one of the tables you have presented, they were given the opportunity to apply for a loan. However, how many of them actually ended up getting the loan? There was a further reduction. Eh? You do remember that? Eh?
Yes.
See? Some of the applicants were granted loans. But in principle, approval in favor of the applicant does not necessarily mean that applicant will end up getting the loan. Yeah? Approval in principle is different from actually getting the loan. So, now in the case of Naledi, the dependent variable of study was the successful granting of the loan. It's a yes or no variable, are we clear? When all is said and done, either you have been granted the loan or else you have not been granted the loan. Are we clear? This is a binary yes or no dichotomous variable. There are only two possible values. When you have such a dependent variable of study, you can use the binary logistic regression model for fitting a regression model. You can identify your predictors by using binary logistic regression analysis. Okay, it's commonly used, and if you go to the library and see dissertations submitted by our students, do not be surprised if you see applications of that in many dissertations. It happens throughout the world, not only in South Africa, it happens everywhere. So this is a simple example, okay, that shows you. Now look at this example. Now, example to identify factors that affect business viability in small and medium-sized enterprises in the cell phone industry. And actually, this is one of the examples I personally took from the MBA program. Can you see? Identify factors that affect viability. Your dependent variable of study is a yes or no variable. Okay? Is this business viable or not? If it's viable, okay, you assign a 1. If it's not viable, you assign a 0. So your dependent variable of study is a yes or no variable. It's a binary variable. So you can use that application here. There's an MBA student who has used this. Now let's talk about multinomial logistic regression analysis. Now instead of only 2 possible outcomes, what happens if you have 3 or more possible outcomes? Example, you go to city of Tshwane and assess the degree of satisfaction of ordinary ratepayers with the quality of municipal services provided to them. Use a Likert scale or a 5-point ordinal scale that varies from 1 to 5. 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. So can you see, instead of 2 possible outcomes, you now have how many? 5. So instead of binary, you use multinomial logistic regression analysis. Okay? And many students can use this. And I'm sure there are some of you who are now busy writing a proposal. Is that right? You are busy writing proposals, So step number 1 is to think of your dependent variable of study. You cannot think clearly until you have articulated your dependent variable of study. Now, I remember clearly, now in the case of Naledi, she got a determination only after she managed to measure her dependent variable of study, namely, has somebody successfully been granted a loan by a microfinance agency? It's a yes or no variable. So once you have a clear understanding of your dependent variable of study, factors affecting that dependent variable of study will end up in your questionnaire. They will be your independent factors. See? So now in the case of, now the example I gave you just now, Instead of being interested only in 2 possible outcomes, now you have interest in 5 possible outcomes. Take the case of city of Swane. You use a 5-point ordinal scale. You allow people to say, 1, if they are very highly satisfied, 2, if they are moderately satisfied, 3, average, 4, below average, and 5, not satisfied at all. Instead of having 2 possible outcomes, you now have how many? 5 possible outcomes. Because 5 is 3 or above, then you can use multinomial logistic regression analysis for fitting a model, okay? It's very important for you to understand this. Whether you do your study here, you do it at the University of Pretoria, you do it at WITS, nothing changes. And just to give you an example, a week ago, there is a student at the University of Pretoria who submitted a PhD thesis for examination, and guess what he did? His interest was about entrepreneurial ability. See, now, when do you say somebody is a good entrepreneur? There are minimum requirements. When an opportunity presents itself, do you have what it takes to rise to the occasion? Can you do a serious self-assessment here? See, an opportunity comes your way. Okay? Most of us say, no, this is too much. I cannot challenge this. No, I cannot tackle this. Let it go. But there are people who say, here is an opportunity, it's coming my way. I need to take that opportunity and make money out of that. Does that make sense? That is what was examined in the PhD thesis. I know the one that came from University of Pretoria. Now, the dependent variable of study is a binary variable. In category 1, you have those who rise to the occasion and who grab that opportunity and who make profit out of that. In the second category, you have all those people who are completely not convinced. They don't get it. They say, no, that's not for me. In fact, you will also see some people who say, something will go wrong, therefore, let it go. So, this brother classified his population of study into 2 broad categories. In category 1, he found those people who had the guts to take an opportunity and make it work for them. In category 2, he put all those who did not have the guts. Okay? The non-believers. And he characterized both categories and he fitted a model. What a reading, eh? What a reading. So, you see, when you define a new variable, okay, what do? You are guided by industry-related definitions. You see, there are norms and standards, eh? You must be aware of that. In South Africa, we have the Bureau of Standards here at Groenkloof Plaza. The Bureau of Standards will tell you what constitutes a 1 kilogram sugar, a 1 liter petrol, and so on. Eh? If it were not for the Bureau of Standards, anybody would have sold. Go to the petrol stations. Eh? Now, how sure are you when people tell you, you just filled up? Eh? My brother, it is 70 liters, so you owe me that much. How do you know? Yeah? How can you tell whether what was given in was not water or anything? The Bureau of Standards always comes in to defend norms and standards, okay, in the interest of the common people. Does that make sense? So everything is defined, everything is quantified, and we know what constitutes what. So when you do research, you can easily say, okay, now in category 1, we have those people who can be entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, and in category 2, you have those people who cannot possibly be successful entrepreneurs due to the following reasons. you make a distinction between left and right, you characterize both categories, and you have earned a PhD from University of Pretoria. Yeah, you fit a model. Does that make sense? Yeah, so no matter who says what, if you fail to define your dependent variable of study, you will not be a successful student. So, an example of a dependent variable of study, success or failure within TUT. Take, for example, let me give you a simple example. There is a program, there's a program, okay? I think it's a new program in TUT, and you just say, we have two categories, okay? Those who succeed and those who do not succeed. So you have a good data set to do your research on. All right, so what we'll do now is, let's take some examples here. I want you to look at this example. Example to identify factors that affect the degree of satisfaction, okay? And you measure satisfaction by using a 5-point ordinal scale that varies from 1 to 5, and you use multinomial logistic regression analysis. And can you see that? Degree of satisfaction where? At food outlets. Can you see that? In Pretoria CBD. So you're going to have to go from one food outlet to the other, okay, and you have to ask customers to rate. So there are 5 possible values from 1 to 5, and every respondent will have to say something. So if you do that, you can use multinomial logistic regression analysis. Now let's take the next one. Have a look at this. Log linear analysis used to assess the significance of associations among categorical variables. The associations could be of order 2, 3, and so on. Example, is there a significant association among the 3 categorical variables? Level of education, level of income, and job satisfaction. There's a student, one of our students has used log linear analysis. If you go to the library, you will see his dissertation. John Biamukama. Okay, he is a graduate from the business school. He has used log linear analysis. His study was on the tourism industry, and he fitted a model that says, if you give them an opportunity, okay, to provide care to tourists coming into South Africa, will they cope? You see? These are visitors coming in from outside, and some of them want to see the animals, and others want to go to Cape Town, and yet others want to go to Durban and so on. They want to see a number of things. These are tourists. So he fitted a model, okay, to identify characteristics of tourists, okay, who come here to visit and then get motivated enough to start a business. By the way, you see, when now there are numerous opportunities extended by the government of South Africa to the rest of the world. They have categories for investors, international investors. So what happens is they go to New York, they go to London, and they invite people to come and invest in South Africa. And some of them, do you know what they do? First, they come as tourists. They won't tell you. They come here as a simple tourist to assess and see for themselves. Then they will come and have an interaction with you. So the study done by John says, if we do ABCD, okay, some potential investors will find it more attractive to come here and set up business. It was a good study. He has published his, I think he has got 2 publications, is that right? I think 2. At least 2 publications out of his thesis. He suffered enormously collecting data. I really feel sorry for him. I think he suffered for about 2 years. Yeah, collecting data, even more. And in those days, I don't think anybody supported him. Yeah, so his model, I've seen some citations. His recommendations were given to DTI and so on. He has done a very good study. So now in your case, you just have to think about a research problem which you can crack. And the critical aspect is having access to data. If there is no likelihood of you getting data, then you got to move away from that kind of research problem. When all is said and done, if you do not have the data, then you are not making progress. Let's be clear about this. I really don't want to mince my words about this. You remember that classic tale about the prophet? Now somebody wants to pray. Muhammad wants to pray. And he should go to the top of the mountain and pray. Okay? So in order for the prayer to happen, either the mountain should come to Muhammad, or else Muhammad should rather go to the mountain. Now, which of the two is likely to happen? Do you honestly think the mountain will bother to come to Muhammad? No. The mountain will never move. Yes. The mountain is not going to move. So if anything, it is Muhammad who has got to move. So you go to where the data is, not the other way around. The data will never come to you. So you got to go to where the data is. Irrespective of who owns the data, you need to make a move towards where the data is. Get yourselves a letter of permission to collect data. Once you do that, you can say we're in business, You can confidently say, I've got a research problem and this is my proposal. Now, if you do not have the data, you could write any number of proposals. None of them will be satisfied, and the ethics committee will not give you ethics approval. So you need to go to where the data is. You also need to ask them for a letter of permission to use their data sets. And most importantly, the letter must say they will have no problem with you using their name in your thesis and in other publications. Okay, I will give you an example. One of our colleagues, okay, this is a D study, a doctoral study. He did a very good study. He published 2 articles. Now, guess what? The company says, you cannot use our name. You cannot use our name, So we had to go and plead with them. We did our best, but they said no. They said, you cannot use our name. Do you see what I'm talking about? A very unfortunate case. So the dissertation is anonymous. It only refers to the company, as it refers to the company as a South African parastatal. Everywhere from the beginning to the end, there's a reference made to a South African parastatal. Now, the brother goes to an international conference, and how sad is it that he cannot spell out the name of the company? Do you see what I'm saying? Is it a fair price to pay? No, according to me, I don't think so. So please make sure that you get your letter of permission for data collection, number 1. And the letter has got to state clearly that you are allowed to use their name in your dissertation and possible publications. Once you have that, your research ethics approval will allow you to collect data, and subsequently your thesis will come out with their name. And when you make an oral presentation, you can proudly say, this is where the study was done, here are my findings. If you construct a framework and you are not allowed to use the name of the company, how unfortunate is that going to be? So you need to be very smart around that. So what we'll do is, let me quickly move. Look, what I'm going to do is, tomorrow we are also coming back. I will be here at 9, and it will be a 2-hour. You see, today I want to complete the theoretical aspect. Tomorrow I will be doing practical exercises in statistical packages such as Spss and Stata. Okay? And let me clarify one thing. It does not matter what statistical package you guys use. You only have to know how to utilize that statistical package for data analysis. It's like driving a car. You see, it does not matter what type of car you drive to get yourself from Pretoria to Johannesburg. It only matters that you do have a driver's license and you have a roadworthy car. You know how to respect the laws of the road. Whether you drive a Nissan or a Volkswagen doesn't mean anything. So just remember, there are some people who perpetuate a lie saying your results will vary depending on what statistical package you have had to use. That's rubbish. It's not true. You just have to know how to use that statistical package, whichever package you choose. You got to know how to interpret your findings and write down your findings, explain them, give a narrative. That's all. So anyway, my discussion, okay, I think my brother will send it to you by email. Okay, you will have the notes, you will have the raw data sets in 3 formats, Excel, Stata, and Spss. So you have the handouts, you see the printouts, you have the steps clearly outlined, you cannot go wrong. So whether you do it in Stata or in Spss, the results are the same. So what we do is, for the most commonly used statistical procedures of data analysis, we'll do numerical examples. And these are actual data sets that have come from the field. Okay? Students are behind these data sets, real students, dissertations and so on, and publications. You do analysis, you interpret the results, and you make sense out of that. So that should serve as an inspiration to you guys. Are we clear? So just to let you know, when you do your data analysis for a postgraduate level study, you must not be overwhelmed by statistical jargons. Okay, tell yourself that you will get an appropriate assistance. Following that assistance, things will be easy. And what you should do is frequency tables. Frequency tables are fairly easy to follow. Okay? You give the frequency table and a small narrative. Now, the narrative will say 40% of my respondents were males, 60% were female. You give a narrative and that's it. And you agree or disagree with what other researchers have had to say. Okay? If there are sharp differences between what you have published and what somebody else has had to say, what do? You explain the discrepancy between these 2 findings. You say the reason why. Okay? Next, cross-tab associations. Is there a significant association between A and B? Okay? It's commonly used. Now, the next example will be regression analysis. So we are going to give you I will give you examples in both statistical packages. So it will be a great deal of pleasure, okay, to go through the notes and play around with the numbers and reproduce the results. Okay, you can reproduce the results and feel comfortable that if you were to do a similar study, you would definitely be able to interpret your findings. So it's an important observation. Now let's have a look here. Let me just say a few things here. I want to use my time for wrapping up this. Let's just I want to talk briefly about factor analysis. Now, who needs factor analysis? You see, you hear about factor analysis. Last year, we had a call from UNISA at GSBL, the Graduate School of Business Leadership at Midrand. A colleague of mine was running a short course, Professor Philip Serumagazaki. He is our external examiner. Now, there was an invitation saying he's running a short course on factor analysis. Would you please come and attend? Okay. And many people went there. So, why are so many people using factor analysis? Why? You know, at the postgraduate level, talk to the students who are doing research. They talk about factor analysis. Why are they talking about factor? Why is it important? See, when you have several variables that are competing with each other, okay, so many factors that seem to be affecting one dependent variable of study, you need to do what? Screening of variables. You need to do data reduction. 99 people are telling you they have leverage over this guy. Surely not all 99 of them can have leverage over that guy. Okay? The guys who have leverage over your friend cannot be more than 5. So what do? You got to trim down the 99 down to 5. How do you do that? By using factor analysis. It's a data reduction technique. You see, when you do data reduction, you will be left with a few handful influential variables. And you can easily interpret, analyze those. You see, your task of doing data analysis becomes easier. If you have 99 of them, it's not going to be easy. So step number 1 would be to do screening or data reduction. That's why people talk about factor analysis. And now many people go there. Now they went to the short course and it was very well done, and you know, with lots of examples, you know, practical examples and so on, and it was successful. So now what we'll do is I'm going to take you through the examples I've prepared for this session, and you will see, depending on which statistical package you have access to. You see, it's a question of license. Now, how many of you have access to SPSS? Can I see you by the show of hands, please? Please raise your hand. Now, I see maybe, okay, 5. Look, 5 students have access to SPSS. All right. Now, the license for SPSS, I think you guys know this very well. The license for SPSS expires every year, and it must be renewed. And when it is renewed, you have to go to the IT, is that right? Anyway, you make a request and somebody gives you the license. There is a colleague of mine, his name is Gift Shabalala. Gift Shabalala goes person to person, okay, installing SPSS and renewing licenses. He does that all the time at the business school. So I don't know which department you guys come from, but you got to have somebody prepared to help you. Okay, you need to have the license for SPSS. Now, there are other students who use a statistical package called Stata. Okay, Stata software is just like SPSS, but Stata has a permanent license. Now, by contrast, SPSS has an annual license. So, come end of the year, the license expires, and it will be up to you to go and have your license renewed. Now, in reality, do students want to be bothered about licenses? Can they honestly pay license fees? I don't think so. So that is why I always prefer to use Stata software, because it comes with a permanent license. Once I have a permanent license, the license does not expire. It's always there. I can use it at any time whenever I really have the need to do data analysis. So I'm not wasting anybody's time, I'm helping myself. So look, this is a practical and honest assessment. Now let me just demonstrate now. The last last minute, let me just show you one simple demonstration. Here are my, now the most commonly used statistical packages, Excel, SPSS, Stata, SAS, eViews, and so on. It does not matter which statistical package you use. They all do the same thing. Your results will not vary depending on the choice of your statistical package. Okay? You just have to know how to use. Whichever one you have chosen, you got to know how to use and interpret, okay, the results of your data analysis. That's all. Now, what I will do is, let me just demonstrate now. I want to demonstrate here. Please go to, yeah, this is Stata. Okay, can you see this? Now in Stata software, I am going to open up a file, and there is a data set which I have given. Okay, I have sent you. Okay, let's open up this one, both one, in Stata. Okay, here is your data set. Okay, can you see this? ID, age, gender, marital status, race, and so on. Now, let's get the percentage here. Go to statistics. Let's have a frequency table. And let's take multiple one-way tables of the following variables. I want to take sex, marital status, race, diarrhea, and toilet. And when you finish this, click on OK. Now here are the findings. Now those are the, look, this is what happens. Okay, now I just used Stata software to obtain frequency tables. Now I'm going to use the same thing for, okay, now let me do the same thing in SPSS. Okay, have a look here. Now we're going to do this tomorrow, but let me show you just for the morale. Have a look here. Now go to SPSS. I believe I have opened up SPSS, is that right? It was, yeah, there you go. Okay, so file, open. Now let's open up this data set. If you go to the desktop, there is a folder, and now here it is, both one, here. Okay, here is my data set, and now to get your results, you just have to go to Analyze, and then you go to Descriptive Stats, Frequencies, and select Sex. Okay, move it to the right. Marital, move it to the right. Race, move it to the right. Diarrhea, move it to the right, and tap water. And when you're done, just click on OK, and have a look here. Look, these results are precisely the same as see, these are the same as the ones you got from Stata software. Okay, they're the same. So it's just a question of convenience to do your analysis in a statistical package for which you have license. Okay, let's not pretend that the license is important, because the license is important. Okay, I don't want to get stranded at a time when I have time for data analysis. Okay, so I prefer to use a statistical package for which I have unfettered access. The license. The license will allow you to do your data analysis at any time. If the license is only available during certain times, you will be constrained. So, out of that practical consideration, I've made a choice. Look, everybody has got to make a choice. One way or another, you got to, and also let me also remind you, and I'm saying so very humbly, remember the days when you started driving your car. Driving a car requires a day-to-day skills build-up. You got to fall in love with the car. You got to drive the car day in, day out. And what happens? The longer you hold on to the car, the more you play around with the car, the more you fiddle around with the car, what happens? You will be perfect. So, by contrast, somebody trying out something here, tomorrow morning they switch sides and they go somewhere else and look, you will never acquire cumulative skills by switching sides. So you stick to one package, you hold on to the package, you practice with the package, and you will be somebody with the skills necessary to grow. You see, I'm talking about vertical growth. Okay, so that's why, there are some people who intentionally tell the students, your results vary depending on the statistical package. It's not true. Your results are invariant to the statistical packages you use. Yeah, they don't change. So what I'm going to do is tomorrow morning, we'll meet again at 9 o'clock. I believe, You see, let's meet at 9. And we're going to do, tomorrow's lecture will be entirely about data analysis, okay, with SPSS and Stata software. You have the raw data sets in Excel, in Stata, and in SPSS. You have the printouts in the handouts, and we're going to do that. Tomorrow, by the time you're done, surely the plan is to make sure that you have some degree of confidence, okay, to do your own data analysis. Are we clear? So you should also remember, you can always send an email and say, I would like to come here and do some analysis and so on. You are more than welcome to send an email and do an appointment and do some data analysis. So we also work by emails. Yeah, we make appointments and so on. We do that. So I think that would be fair. So tomorrow at 9, we are coming back to the same venue. Yes. Yeah, I think, okay, now what we'll do is by email, I think you are going to send them. There you go. So everybody is going to receive the data sets and the handouts, and read the handouts also. So I think it will be easy. All right, I think we should leave it. Yes. All right, okay, thanks.